Welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on President Trump's swing through the Middle East. Dr. Alon Burstein is here to break down everything we've learned this week. As always, Alon, it's good to see you. There's a lot to talk about. Let's start off with a little bit of what we've been hearing out of Trump taking questions on Air Force One. He was asked today whether Israel has been an obstacle to peace talks in Gaza. He didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he once again mentioned the idea of the U.S. taking over Gaza, saying, quote, "I'd be proud to have the United States have it, take it, make it a freedom zone, let some good things happen," unquote. Is it probably smart of Trump alone to not directly answer that question? If Trump was so inclined, could he have an argument that Israel is acting as a barrier to peace at this point?
It's good to see you, Austin. Like with most of Trump's negotiations since he came back into the White House, if we look at the tariffs, if we look at the negotiations with Ukraine and Russia, it really depends on what it is that we're analyzing. Are we analyzing immediate results? Are we analyzing long-term stability? Are we analyzing the interests of the United States as they have been articulated over the years, which, for example, with regards to tariffs in the EU has been increasing cooperation, or the new interests of the United States as Trump has been articulating them, which are slightly different. Similarly, when understanding what is the aspiration for peace, everyone can look at peace differently when it comes to the region. Trump wants to see results very fast. He promised to end the war in Gaza and end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours of when he came into office. He, to some extent, could claim success when it came to at least the truce that happened in the Gaza Strip. Certainly can't claim success when it comes to Ukraine, but he wants to see results fast. And if I compare this to the situation that happened in Ukraine, when he was meeting with Zelensky was saying, look, we can make a ceasefire now, but that won't be peace for the long term. Russia will violate it. Similarly, when we look at the situation in the Gaza Strip, what we have right now is a complete stalemate between Israel and Hamas when it comes to the negotiations. The way the original deal between the sides, it was articulated by Biden now exactly a year ago, was the 23rd of May last year, the first time this deal was proposed, and eventually Trump pretty much forced Israel to accept it in January. The way this was articulated, the first phase of the truce happened the way it was supposed to happen, but then this was supposed to automatically lead into a second phase of the truce that would be negotiations for a long-term ceasefire, an end to the war, idea of withdrawal, complete freedom for all the hostages, and things like that. To large extents, Israel has been the one that has not agreed to go forward with that, because Israel has said that it is not willing to end the war. It is not willing to just have the idea of withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, even if this means all the hostages come home, because then Hamas remains in power. The deal previously, the way Biden had articulated it, didn't really say what happens then, who stays in power in the Gaza Strip. Israel has said that it wants total victory over Hamas, and if we look at the immediate result, if Trump would like to see a ceasefire, a truce, and hostages coming home, then yes, one could make a valid claim to say, look, Hamas is saying we'd like to go ahead with the second phase of the deal. We'd like to have a complete ceasefire. We'd like to have an idea of withdrawal. Hamas has agreed to almost a 5-year ceasefire. Israel's not agreeing to that. Israel's claim, in turn, is that, well, that's not going to be a peace between the sides. That's just going to lead us back to October 7th the way it was before. One thing I will say when it comes to Israel's rhetoric, Israel is seeing that Trump is turning away from the Israeli narrative and much more embracing the narrative of like, well, you could have a ceasefire and the hostages come home, which is really what's important to Trump personally. He's really taken an interest in the hostages. Israel's starting to see that, and so Israel's almost escalating the rhetoric. If in the past it was talking about total victory, which is something very amorphous, we've talked about that over the years, I guess by now, over the years, I was going to correct myself. Now, in the last couple of days, Israel's been talking about the complete surrender of Hamas. That's a different term. And I don't think it's coincidental that Israel's all of a sudden saying it's not something that's amorphous that you can say, well, you have total victory because the hostages came home. No, now Israel's already talking in terms of we demand complete surrender of Hamas, which to some extent is saying we don't want the deal that Hamas may be putting forward or that Qatar may be trying to convince the United States to go forward. We want something else. And as far as Trump is concerned, wanting a fast deal, wanting things to just come to a freeze right now, yes, I can see that he's getting aggravated with Israel's position.
Taking a look at Gaza, Trump has mentioned Gaza quite a bit on this trip alone. Let's talk a little bit about Hamas. Specifically, we saw Trump arriving in Qatar. This is Air Force One arriving there. Trump held a roundtable with top Qatari officials this week where he said Hamas is going to have to be dealt with in Gaza. Alon, how does Qatar likely feel about that? Hamas's external leader was staying in Qatar up until his assassination.
He was staying in Qatar, and most of Hamas's external leadership right now, the entire council that is the leadership of Hamas, does reside primarily in Qatar. They move around a little bit. Some of them are in Turkey, sometimes in Egypt, but primarily they are in Qatar. You know, Qatar is an extremely interesting country. It's an extremely interesting country because of its geographical location. I've told you that I plan to get a map of the Middle East behind me, but I don't have one yet. But its geographical location puts it between Saudi Arabia and Iran, close in the area of the Persian Gulf. Trump said they wanted to maybe change the name to the Arabian Gulf, but the Persian Gulf. And to some extent, it does not have a very strong army, but it has managed to survive by being friends with everyone. It negotiates openly with Iran and also used to fund ISIS and at the same time house the US fleet. It acts as a courier between Hamas and Israel and is friends with everyone. So to some extent, what Qatar will do will probably be to try to placate all sides, try to befriend the United States and say, sure, if you want to deal with Hamas, that's okay. Meanwhile, they will probably be the ones to offer Hamas safe haven, to do all kinds of things, not in the sense of betraying the United States, just that's their MO. Their MO has constantly been throughout their entire history, maintain friends with everyone, and they're one of the only countries that has managed to succeed. I think what Trump is saying, though, when he says Hamas has to be dealt with, is leaving it vague on purpose, because right now what we have, again, is a situation where de facto, Hamas is the only government in the Gaza Strip. Israel does not want that to continue. The United States does not want that to continue. At the same time, Israel has refused to have the Palestinian Authority come in and be the government in the Gaza Strip. So then what do we have? Like, what is going to be the next thing? Is it going to be someone replacing Hamas? Is it going to be Israel's total victory over Hamas? Is it going to be an Israeli administration or United States administration? When he says Hamas is going to have to be dealt with, it's deliberately leaving it vague so that possibly what that means is that the Hamas leadership will go into exile. Possibly what that means is that Hamas will be dismantled militarily, but will be part of the governing units in the Gaza Strip. I think he doesn't know. He doesn't know what the sides are going to agree to, and he's almost inviting Qatar to say, come up with a formula. Come up with a formula that lets me say Hamas was dealt with. If that formula is they've been dismantled, great. If that formula is that they've changed their name and they've become the new moderate government in the Gaza Strip, I think Trump would be fine with that too. If they've changed, he's just trying to come up with a formula and saying it'll have to be dealt with and almost inviting Qatar. So do that. Come up with a formula that we can all live with.
Alon, I got to ask you about one of the bigger stories of the week, the Qatari Air Force One story. We learned over the weekend that President Trump wants to accept a luxury jumbo jet as a gift from the ruling family of Qatar. He wants to use it as Air Force One. The matter still appears to be under legal review, by the way, and the Qatari government said a final decision hasn't been made yet. This isn't the type of story I'd usually ask you about, but you follow the Middle East closer than anyone I know. Is giving a free plane to a U.S. president a new one to you? What was your reaction when you heard that story?
It's a new one, for sure, but a lot of things that have been happening surrounding Trump's visit to the Middle East is a new one. Look, Trump, everything in the world has been said about him, but some of the consistent things are he's unpredictable, so you can get him to switch sides based on if he likes you or not. He is very emotional. He likes flattery. He likes when people look up to him and look up to the United States. We've seen every person, every world leader that has come to the United States has brought him a gift. Very, very symbolically, each time it's a different gift. Never brought a plane, but every time has brought him a gift. But one of the things that we're seeing is that the Middle East leaders know very well that they need to stay on Trump's good side. You asked me in the past when we were talking about Netanyahu, is he looking at that meeting of Trump and Zelensky and thinking that could be me? Every leader is looking at that and thinking that could be me, and therefore I need Trump to like me. So the fact that Qatar has given this plane to Trump and said this is, to honor you, doesn't surprise me. Every leader in the Middle East has tried to do something to that effect. Saudi Arabia, just as a small example, commissioned a mobile McDonald's. unit to follow Trump around wherever he went in Saudi Arabia because it is world famous how much he likes McDonald's. And should he want to have a Big Mac while on Saudi soil, there was a mobile McDonald's that was following him around wherever he went. That's a, albeit smaller example than a new plane Air Force One, but to me, it comes from a similar place. It comes from the place of the leaders saying to Trump, I want to be your buddy. It's not just about what is good for the United States and good for our countries and geopolitical arrangements and previous alliances. I want you to go home and think, I like this. I like that person. And one thing I'll say, and we may bring it up later, but one thing I'll say with regards to where this sort of bore fruit was in Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia twice. He says to bin Salman, the crown prince, how much I love this guy. How much I love this guy. What won't I do for him? You see bin Salman sitting there and going like this. The two leaders, that is more meaningful to some extent in the current world of diplomacy with Trump than any deal that you sign. We've seen this with the Iranian deal and in the past of Trump's first presidency. Any deal that you sign, Trump can walk away from. If he likes you, if you have good relations between the leaders, then you're golden. That's how I read this Air Force One. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors and speculations, espionage. I mean, the Secret Service, I wouldn't want to be in their position trying to understand what this plane is. But beyond any larger diplomatic things there might be, there's an attempt here to simply make Trump like the leadership in Qatar, and I think quite successfully.
We've talked about a lot of things over the months alone, and now we can cross a mobile McDonald's unit off of our bucket list. I got to ask you about Syria. Syria was another big part of this trip, Alon. Late last year, just to catch everybody up, we remember when opposition forces toppled the Assad regime. The head of those forces, and Syria's current president, is Ahmad al-Shara. Trump met with him earlier this week, which would have been unthinkable months ago. In fact, the U.S. once offered $10 million for information about his whereabouts in relation to his previous connection to al-Qaeda in Iraq. So, Alon, how did we get here? And what has al-Shara done to get Syria in the U.S.'s good graces?
The arc of Ahmad al-Shara has been very interesting to see over the last several months. He started, just a brief moment of history. Like you said, he started actually as an al-Qaeda member, and he was part of al-Qaeda in Iraq. He was then sent to Syria. Now I'm talking about in the early 2011, 2012. He was sent to Syria to establish al-Qaeda in Syria. Then he broke with ISIS, and he was the leader of al-Qaeda in Syria. And then he broke with al-Qaeda and formed his own Syrian branch. And really, that arc is part of the development from being a global jihadist to a local Syrian. He really took on the identity of an Islamist, but a Syrian Islamist, someone who worries about Syria, the Syrian national. Then, when the time was right, after Israel pretty much had weakened Hezbollah and Iran as a result of the Israel-Hamas war, eventually his forces launched their surprise attack, deposed Assad within a week after 13 years of a civil war, deposed Assad within a week, and he becomes a new president. At this point, now we're talking about at the end of 2024, no one really knew what's the trajectory. Who are we dealing with? And he really took a lot of steps to show that he has trying to shed his old personality, the old jihadist. First of all, he reverted back to his name. We're calling him Ahmad al-Shara, but until then, he was known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani. He was known through his jihadi name that he had taken on when he was underground. He reverted back to his old name as a symbolic way of saying, I'm no longer a jihadi fighting against the Assad regime. Now I'm a respectable individual. One of the things we also saw, which also is important to Trump, is how people dress. We saw over the course of the first month that he took over, he stopped wearing his military uniform, then gradually put on a button shirt, and then at the beginning of January started wearing a suit. That matters. It matters in terms of what you're signaling to the world. What are you? Are you a resistance fighter? Are you still seeing yourself as a revolutionary and Islamist? Or are you dressed like the way Western, quote unquote, world leaders want to see you? Alongside that, other things that he has done in terms of policies in Syria. He has tried very hard to unite the different factions within Syria. Within the Syrian civil war, we had a couple of major factions. There were the Kurdish forces, the Islamist forces, the Druze forces, ISIS. And then we also have like dozens of smaller militias. He tried very hard to unite the different militias into one more nationalistic army that has really created a lot of favor with the world, trying to say Syria is not going to fall apart into now warring factions like we saw Afghanistan fall apart every time there was a new leader that came up, but instead they're all going to come together. He also issued a lot of different decrees with regards to not persecuting the members of the former regime, not persecuting Alawites by and large. There have been a lot of cases of intercommunal violence, and Israel has also intervened to protect the Druze population in Syria. But broadly, he has really shown the West that he would like to disassociate from the previous ethnic divisions in Syria and move towards a different direction. In addition to that, a couple of other things that have been important is, number one, he has kept the doors open. He is talking to the West and has said that he would like to turn that way, but he hasn't kicked Russia entirely out of Syria yet, signaling, you want to come to me, i.e. you, the West, want to come to me, because otherwise Syria could go a different way. He'd rather go with the West. He hates Russia. He hates Iran. He hates China, all the countries that helped back up the Assad regime. At the same time, he needs some way to survive. So he signaled to all the sides, I can go in your direction, but if you don't accept me, I will have to go the other direction. And that has really been, I would say, an intelligent move. The last thing I'll say is he really played his allies to his favor. He has built a close alliance with Erdogan in Turkey. He also worked very hard to forge a good relationship with bin Salman, the crown prince, and he got those two figures to convince Trump this is something that's worthwhile. According to rumors, he promised Trump also a lot of things. He promised Trump that he would promote the building of a new Trump Tower in Damascus. Qatar gives a plane. Saudi Arabia does what it did. Everyone's trying to do something to get Trump to like you. He also promised Trump that he would give the United States a lot of concessions when it comes to the energy production in Syria. There are rumors that I will say are very unsubstantiated that he alluded that he would be willing to even possibly normalize relations with Israel. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that he is trying to show Trump, look, I'm worth your investment at this point. You invest in me and help stabilize my regime. And in turn, what do you want in the Middle East? You want good business with the United States. You want stability, and you want to see peace in the region. You want to at least not see war. I can deliver all those things. I think he did that very well. And right now, he's reaping the rewards.
This is a photo we've been looking at of him with the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. This is the photo they took during the meeting. Expanding on the Syria piece of this, does it seem so far that it's likely that this new iteration of Syria is actually going to be more attractive to the West in the long term? Do you foresee this relationship running into any obvious challenges eventually, aside from the Russia-China-Iran piece of this?
So it's important to note that while I said that he's worked very hard to unite all the factions, they're not united. They're not united yet. There could still very well be a fracturing apart of the different parties within Syria and turning inward once again into civil war. Again, we saw this in examples in Afghanistan. We saw this with examples in Libya. We have seen a lot of examples when the dictator is toppled. That doesn't mean that you enter into an era of stability. He, again, is playing his alliances very well. So he's forged an alliance with Turkey. It's going to help. The PKK has just disbanded and declared a ceasefire. That is going to help him in the sense of the Kurdish sort of fervor for violence is going to help. But there are still militant Kurdish forces within Syria. The Druze population down south, Israel has been working very hard. Staying is going to protect them. There's a lot of questions as to why Israel all of a sudden decided to do this, and a lot of people speculate it's actually to cause a wedge between the different factions in Syria. But there are things that could still sort of really be in the way of Ahmadinejad stabilizing Syria and then presenting to the quote-unquote West, here is a new rebuilt Syria. Come invest in me, and we could be the new Riviera of the Middle East, so to speak. There's also always the dangers that at the end of the day, because of this factionalization, Ahmadinejad could be assassinated, and he doesn't have a stable regime yet. If he doesn't have a stable regime, we don't know who would be the successor. That would likely lead us again into a cascade of civil war. It's also a dangerous path for him to go down because while he himself has tried very hard to shed the past, his group and followers, we used to be called Jabhat al-Nusra, then Tahrir al-Shams, and the group changed its name over time. They were a lot of jihadi loyalists. Now he's worked very hard again to bring them back into the fold of a nationalized Syria. But there's no telling that's actually going to go that route. Right now, he's trying very hard, but everyone in the region is trying to intervene. We have Israel that has taken over territory in southern Syria, Turkey that is always looking towards northern Syria, Iran always has what to say with regards to the border with Iraq and Syria. So he's working very hard to achieve stability. He's trying to forge strong alliances. Again, we have Saudi Arabia, Turkey. We also have seen in the last couple of months, Qatar got authority from the United States, because this is before the sanctions were lifted. Now they're lifted. Got authority from the United States, despite the sanctions, to pay the salaries of all the Syrian administration for 3 months. That's another way Qatar is building its influence. So everyone is trying to prop him up. It may work. We may see him stabilize and manage to actually present to the world a more westernized version of Syria. But there are a lot of forces in Syria that still will have to be placated in one way or another in order for that to succeed.
Let's take a look at Trump's arrival in Saudi Arabia. This was a royal welcome that they gave him. Trump signed several new deals with Saudi Arabia this week. The president made a pitch to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to join the Abraham Accords alone. Basically, he's asking them to recognize Israel. But Saudi Arabia has long maintained that recognition of Israel is tied to the establishment of a Palestinian state along the lines of Israel's 1967 borders. Alon, do the Saudis have an appetite to join the Accords?
At the moment, it does not look like they would need to. You know, one of the things that we've really seen has been interesting in the current version of Trump and the Middle East is that, you know, like I said in the past, one of the most consistent things about Trump is whatever my predecessor did, I am going to do the opposite. That is something that has been very, very important for him every time he comes into office. And then we have to look, who was his predecessor? When it came to his first presidency, it was Obama. Obama had a terrible relationship with Israel and Netanyahu and had worked very hard to rebuild the relationship between the United States and the Muslim world. The Biden administration, in turn, while it has been said, a narrative has been built that it was not as supportive of Israel, the fact is that materially and in the United Nations, it was one of the most supportive administrations of Israel. And in turn, Biden had a lot of personal issues with the Crown Prince for his involvement in the assassination of the Saudi reporter Jamal Khashoggi. And in addition to that, Biden had also conditioned any deal for security defense between the United States and Saudi Arabia on normalization with Israel. All of a sudden, in comes Trump, and once again, we're seeing that he is pretty much doing the opposite. He, is still on Israel's side, but he said, "Yeah, you know what? I don't need Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel. If that doesn't work right now, that shouldn't hold up our deals." He specifically and explicitly said in his speech in Saudi Arabia, in the past, our leaders have thought that they should be the moral compass of foreign leaders. I don't think we should anymore. That was specifically addressing bin Salman and saying, I don't care if you were involved in that assassination. Trump said some very surprising things in that speech in Saudi Arabia. Among others, he said that different quote unquote state builders from the West have tried over the years to impose their ways on the Arab and Islamic world, and that was a mistake, and the Muslim world should build itself up. These are things that we did not expect to hear from Trump, and really the only way that I think we can read them is he saw that Biden had a relatively bad relationship with a lot of the Middle East leaders. Biden conditioned a lot of U.S.-supported deals on people upholding human rights, democratization, and Trump is saying, I don't need to do that. I don't need to go down that route. And all of a sudden, he's making all kinds of speeches in Saudi Arabia about the fact that actually we have a lot to learn from the Islamic world, and the Islamic world has really built itself up. I mean, just as an anecdote, I'll say there is a very famous Saudi academic who was looking at Trump's speech, and he said, this could have been written by Frantz Fanon, who was a 20th century Marxist. Like, he was saying, like, this doesn't sound like the Trump who said that Islam is the enemy of the West, that the Trump that said that the Quran is filled with preaching towards murder. So we've really seen a change. And then, linking back to your question, does Saudi Arabia have an appetite for normalization relations with Israel? I think in principle, yes. The Saudi Crown Prince would like that direction long term, but right now he's lost the urgency. He no longer needs that as a way to sort of buy in good favor with the United States. And so at this point, I don't see it happening without any progress really towards maybe not a Palestinian state, but at least a resolution of the current war and possibly things dying down. In the past, he was very pressured to do that. Right now, he has absolutely no need.
One more thing before we go. We started this conversation by talking a little bit about Israeli politics. We're looking at the silhouette version of the Tel Aviv skyline. So Trump visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE on this trip alone. It's hard to ignore that he didn't visit Israel. Has Netanyahu had anything to say about Trump's Middle East visit?
The fact that he didn't visit Israel is glaring. And again, I'll say the last president that did that was Obama in his first Middle East trip. He came to Istanbul, Turkey, and Cairo in Egypt, and also bypassed Israel. And then that was heavily criticized. In the current situation, though, Netanyahu is really in a bind. He cannot afford to alienate Trump. Unlike even Ukraine, where they obviously need the United States support, but they're also looking to Europe and they're looking to other countries that might be able to supply them if the United States backs away from them. Israel has no other major ally. If Israel would lose Trump's support, if it would lose both the U.S. armaments or the U.S. veto in the United Nations, Israel is standing alone. So to some extent, Netanyahu is in a much more vulnerable position when it comes to criticizing Trump. And that is one of the reasons that we have heard nothing out of Israel with regards to this trip. Israel is right now in an extremely weakened position. If we're looking back at these pictures of Netanyahu and Trump, that meeting that happened in February where Netanyahu was the first world leader that was invited to meet Trump. Trump is talking about anything that Israel wants to do. He's going to support them. He's going to take over Gaza. Now, all of a sudden, we have a situation where Trump is sitting in Saudi Arabia. He's signing massive weapons deals that Israel does not want to see signed with other Middle East countries. There were reports that a month ago, when Netanyahu was in the White House, he specifically asked Trump to not remove the sanctions off of Syria and to make sure the sanctions remain. We now see Trump goes to the Middle East, doesn't consult with Israel, simply removes the sanctions on Syria. We have a lot of reports that the United States is moving more and more rapidly towards a deal with Iran. Vice President Vance said just a week ago that maybe Iran will still be allowed to enrich uranium. There is a lot of fear within Israel about the fact that Trump seems to have turned not away from Israel, but opened towards the other Middle East countries and seeing the point of view of America first, as far as he's concerned. There was actually a report that was in one of the Middle East outlets that was quoting the State Department that said, we are on Israel's side, but we are going to do what's right for America. And what's right for America right now is to end the war in Gaza. That's a threatening message almost to Netanyahu, who is saying, I don't want to end the war in Gaza until Hamas surrender a total victory. But because Israel is in a very weakened position with regards to the ability to criticize Trump, what it is doing, what Netanyahu is doing, is the safest course, saying absolutely nothing, not criticizing, not praising. We have seen almost radio silence coming out from Israel with regards to Trump's visit. All we are seeing is every single day, there are leaks that are coming out from anonymous sources in the Prime Minister's office, clearly from the Prime Minister in Israel, that are saying if a deal is not signed by the end of Trump's visit, Israel is going to go ahead with its major expansion, Gideon's Chariots, the major operation in the Gaza Strip. Israel is repeatedly threatening that, anonymously, but is repeatedly threatening that. I don't think that Israel wants to say that publicly. I don't know if that will actually happen, given the current balance of power between Israel and the United States. But that is the only thing that Israel is saying. It's sort of saying, we're not involved in the talks. Trump is not consulting with us. So we said that we're going to go ahead with this operation, and we will likely go ahead with this operation. We will see if that actually happens.
Alon, as always, good to see you. Go give Alon a subscribe on his personal YouTube channel. He does his own very informative updates on the Middle East. Alon, as always, good to see you. Have a good rest of your night.